Listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 234.
Today's podcast is brought to you by onetdc.com. Dog agility can be hard on your dog's body. Help keep their joints and muscles healthy with 1TDC. 1-tetradecanol complex is a clinically studied blend of unique fatty acid oils that can support your dog's joint health. 1TDC provides a healthy inflammatory response from head to tail. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1TDC special offer by purchasing online at bda1tdc.com. That's BDA, the number 1, TDC.com.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by hititboard.com. Hititboard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The Hit It board can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to hititboard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. Today we're going to be talking about how you can get the most out of your NQ runs, your non-qualifying runs. There's a lot of valuable information there, and we're going to help you get the most out of it. So I think the first thing that I would suggest for non-qualifying runs is to make sure that you have them recorded. So you obviously don't know if you're going to qualify or not when you run. So that means recording all of your runs. And as we talk to people, I often find that people are really excited to have their qualifying runs on tape, and they're less excited to have their non-qualifying runs on tape. And I think that for a lot of dog handler teams, it should actually be the opposite. If you're looking to get better, your non-qualifying runs are going to be the most instructive to you.
I think that's probably mostly true. I also like to point out that you need to know what you've done well so you can do it again on purpose. I think people, especially those of you out there who are kind of talented, and naturally gifted at this dog agility thing, you do things and have success and you're not exactly sure why. And so we want to point those things out as well when we're reviewing our videos. So, you can repeat that, say, hey, you did this very well. Keep doing that.
I think that videotape is absolutely vital for checking things like timing. You can't trust how things feel on course. The video will give you the answer. I think also the idea that mistakes are only in NQ runs is also not very true either. There can be qualifying runs with wide turns or with head checks by the dog, things like that. And so you really want to be reviewing all of your runs. But those NQ runs, you want to look at why things happened. You want to look and see, was this a dog training issue? Was this a handling mistake? Was this timing? So that you can go and address those things in the practice field. Yeah,
I mean, if you had to choose between qualifying and non-qualifying runs, I would choose non-qualifying runs, right? There's probably a reason that things went wrong. And you definitely want the video so you can review, as we talked about. And that's so important because I run into a lot of people who don't review, right? I ask them for the video and they say, I didn't get one. Well, why didn't you get one? And they have lots of reasons that they didn't get one. These reasons are very legitimate, right? There were only a few dogs entered in the class. I had to run 2 or even 3 dogs in the same height. There were so few people at the trial, or everybody had gone home and I'm running a novice. These are all very legitimate reasons, but we have to make an effort to get those videos because I'm telling you, that's how valuable videos are. They're valuable because you can share them with your classmates, experienced dog people, your friends who might know more about the sport than you, or you've been together a long time and they can see something that you don't. Because I think we all develop blind spots in our training and our understanding of the dog. The other thing is just the inaccuracy of the memory. I'm always a little annoyed when someone says, no, that's not how it was. I remembered it as X, Y, and Z. And I look at it and I play it over and over and I say, this is completely different from what you said. Right. And so I find that myself, I was like that. Right. So right. I late timing on some front crosses and I was pulling the border collie off these jumps, or no, she was going really wide, I think, on jumps. And, by the time I realized it, or the only time I realized it was after I reviewed the video. Because until I saw the video, I was like, no, you're wrong. I'm doing it plenty on time, right? She should be doing this. And the video demonstrates very clearly that that wasn't the case. So now, sure, 20 years later, I'm like, okay, let's just wait for the video. In a lot of spots, I'm going to say, I think it was this, but let's go to the tape. All right. And that's why we need to do that. It's not good enough. I don't care how good you think your memory is. We're all very much influenced by circumstance. And there are limits, like actual physical limits on what your eye can take in.
Oh, that's what I was just about to say. It's not just memory. It is what you can actually see. And there are things that you could not see happen. Things that happen behind you, out of view, things that you were only able to slightly catch out of your peripheral vision. And so that's why reviewing these videos is so important. And there's another aspect of your non-qualifying runs that I think is extremely underutilized. And that is it provides you with things to work on. So when you make a mistake on course, that is a fantastic sequence to take into your training field. And a lot of times it doesn't take a lot of room. It's not the entire course. It's one turn, one front cross, one rear cross, one piece of the course in particular that gave you and your dogs trouble. And these are the things that I love to take back, set up, and run again. And I think that this is done by a very small minority of handlers, because once you've run it, you feel like you've run it. Even if you made a mistake, you feel like, well, I'm not going to see that exact setup again. That's, one thought. And then I think another thought is, well, I've already done that. Let me move on to a sequence that I haven't already done. But these are a gold mine for improvement. And one thing that I like about this approach is that we don't always know exactly what about a sequence caused the mistake. We don't know if it's the spacing or the exact angles of the jumps. And so by setting up the exact sequence at home, we can practice something that we already know we need to work on because we already ran it and failed once. And we can go to the practice field, try multiple different ways of running it, work through whatever problem we had, but also discover the best way of running that for our dog and given their skill set, and try multiple different options. Whereas when you run it in a competition, you only get to run it one way. You only get to have that plan A. But sometimes our plan B or our plan C actually was a better plan. We just didn't know it. So by taking that sequence home, running our option A, option B, option C, looking at those on tape, evaluating those performances, not only are we going to fix our errors, we're going to learn about our dog.
Yeah, I think with the arrival of wraps and backsides, now you have multiple choices, so that in a trial situation, obviously you can only choose one particular way or one combination of choices. And then you kind of want to time them all, right? A lot of times there's going to be 4 possibilities or 6 or 8 different ones. And about half of them are pretty bad, but then the other 4 or 2 are pretty reasonable, and you really weren't sure. And so you can time it both ways. So you want to set that up at home. So when you run into the challenge again, you know the answer. That's the key here, right? You want to know the answer. So I have 2 points to make about this. The first point is this is really an old trick. This is something when we started in agility over in Flash Pause in Houston, Texas with Jane Simmons Smoke, they used to do that where they'd pull the most challenging run from a trial and you would see it in your next class, right? If they alternate kind of exercise week and a course night week, but that course was going to be a tough course or a course with challenges, or the sequences would be based on some difficulty that people had, right? So this is a long-standing tradition that you're going to see all around the agility world, not just here in the United States, but everywhere. After the Agility World Championship, they're going to find the hardest parts of these courses and they're going to find their way into instructors' courses, right? So I think a lot of instructors out there listening, they kind of know this already. But let me explain it this way. Let's say you're new to the sport and you kind of run through a mental checklist of all the things you need, right? I've taught my dogs all the obstacles. I know how to front cross, rear cross, blind cross, and do backsides. Right. And I can do all of those things. I'm doing some sequences and now I go. And then it turns out I tried to do a rear cross, which my dog's been doing fine on these pretty basic setups here at home. But then when there was a tunnel there, my dog refused the jump, turned too early, kind of. They didn't commit to the jump, and then they went into the tunnel. That was maybe like 10 feet away. Okay. So now it turns out you've identified a hole in your training, right? At no point in your training did you ever do a rear cross where there was a tunnel 10 feet away that could possibly draw their attention away, right? And cause them to refuse this jump. And so now you know you need to go back and do more work. So in your mind, before you went to this show, you're like, okay, I'm 100% on front crosses. I'm 100% on blind. I'm 100% on rear crosses. All we need to get is quote unquote experience. Actually, you are 0% on rear crosses where there's a tunnel trap. Right? You're 0%. You've never done it. You never even set it up one time. So now's your chance to go back, teach it from the ground up, move the tunnel away a little bit, then bring it in closer, and then make it even more challenging than what you saw in the ring. Right? So it turns out, we think we're prepared, but the courses are actually the real instructors here, right? They teach us, they show us where we're weak. They show us where we haven't done enough training, or in many cases where we haven't done any training at all. Okay. So that's the first point that I want to make. The second point I want to make is everybody kind of knows to do these things. I think most people know to do these things, especially high level competitors, but a staggeringly large number of people will not actually address it.
They don't get to it.
They don't get to it. They add it to a mental list and they never get to it. Okay. And I had this problem. So I'll give you a very specific example on lead outs with Gitchy. So she was the most recent dog I ran. I would lead out, say, with dog on right for 2 or 3 jumps, and then I would like front cross while she's taking, the second or third jump, and then I want her to turn left, for example, switch to the left arm. And she would come to the correct side, but then she would go by the next jump, right? So essentially she was missing. We were just getting a drive-by on those. And so it happened once and you're like, okay, darn. Okay. You're like, okay, well, next time I need to stand closer. And then you're standing closer next time and then it happened again. And you're like, okay, I really need to work on this. And then a month later, it happens again in the course. Okay. And now you have a pattern. You look back and you say, okay, I only have 3 NQs in jumpers over the past 4 months, right? Like 20 runs, right? 17 Qs, 3 NQs, they were all the same thing. You didn't need to have the second and third ones if you had gone back and fixed that first one. Then you would have 2 more double Qs. You would have whatever you guys need for your qualifications for nationals or your ranking or invitation or whatever. If you had gone and fixed it right away. So this is the big thing that I have taken is I'm going to try and fix problems right away. You come to me and you say you have a problem. I'm like, okay, let's do it right now. Right? Like, what do you want to work on today? Tell me what the last, like, if you don't know, I'm going to be like, what's the last thing you messed up? Okay, it's that. We're going to fix that right now and for forever. Okay, we're going to figure this out right now because otherwise you just don't get to it, right? It goes to this mental checklist that rarely is complete.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. You're never going to be done with the training and so of your dog. And so like having a plan is good. And I'm not anti-plan, but you should leave some room in your training that is not plan-based and is problem-based, that you come home and you address a problem that cropped up. It wasn't part of your plan. Mm-hmm. It wasn't what you intended to be working on this week. Maybe you have maybe you're super organized and you have a skills-based plan that you're working on getting ready for World Team Tryouts in May, which is about, 6 months from now or 7 months from now. And you have a plan. There should be some room in that plan for addressing things that pop up. And I just think that, setting up the exact sequence can just be so valuable. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really great way for a lot of people to approach their training. And not only that, but I think that there's a little extra mental boost or confidence boost that comes from setting up something that you messed up and then getting it right.
Yeah. And not the entire course, obviously just the sequence. Here are some very solid tips. These are absolutely must-dos in my opinion. When you set up that sequence and you run it, sure, figure out what went wrong. Okay. It's like quantum leap. You're going to travel back in time. You're going to fix what
once went wrong.
That's right. You're going to fix it. Okay. But then here's what I like to do, especially because you already have the sequence set up. Okay. Make the sequence harder, right? If the spacing is harder, if it's tighter, I tighten it up. Okay. If the sequence is harder, if the spacing is wider, I move that jump that's hard to get out even a little further until it's ridiculous, like so ridiculous that it's a judge would never do it, right? So now I have the worst possible scenario of this challenge, and I have conquered it, right? So now when I go back and I see the regular challenge, it's a joke. It's easy. It's no problem at all because I've conquered the much harder versions. And then after you've done that, so now you did the regular challenge, you did the harder versions of the challenge, and the third thing you can do obviously is alternate choices, right? So backside versus a throttle, or basically changing like the key point where you opt for one sequence versus another, as opposed to doing an entire renumbering, right? So everybody's done that, especially instructors. You set up a 20 obstacle course, and then you run it one way, and then you walk and run, and then you just completely renumber it, or run it backwards and renumber it and change the way the teeter points and swap out a couple obstacles or whatever. I'm not talking about doing that. I'm talking about honing in on it and saying, if it's like 7 obstacles, what's different is going to be like the 3-4 or the 4-5 challenge, or the 3-4-5 or whatever.
It's almost like a trick. It's almost like you're tricking your dog a little bit. You're going to give them a similar opening where it's the anti-patterning, where they think they know what is coming, but you change your handling, and in the face of new handling, your dog should respond. And if they don't, then they haven't necessarily learned the skills. They've just learned that sequence for the day. And so that's why we really like changing things up just a little bit, kind of anti-pattern the dog, and then make sure that they can respond in both situations.
Yeah. So I was out there with my training partner. She's got a young dog, and she says, hey, we need to work on this throttle stuff, the straight line, the most difficult throttles. And so, so we go out there and we hammer out some throttles and, manipulate the jumps and then bring them back into a straight line. And now she's doing these beautiful throttles, right? And she does 2, 3, or 4 of them in a row. Hey, very excited. All right. Looks like we've conquered this problem. And I say, okay, now don't throttle and just do the backside, like a 180, right? Jump 1, jump 2, not as a throttle. Dog couldn't do it, right? 3, 4 times in a row, throttled every single time, right? Even though the handler was like coming in there and like blocking her way from throttling, trying to get her over the bar just to take it as a normal 1-2, 180 type situation. The dog was throttling every time. So that's the danger of you taking the sequence, working it, and being like, aha, I've conquered it. You have not conquered it necessarily. It's possible you may have one of those genius dogs, you did conquer it. But for the most part, you've worked through this problem, you kind of patterned it, and now you need the anti-patterning. So this additional critical step of making the challenge more difficult, and then choosing the alternative version of it while giving it the same opening and close. And the close is much less crucial than the opening, usually an obstacle or two, where the dogs can't pattern off it, right? They have to have true response to your handling. So it's very, very critical. That's what's going to separate the good from the truly elite, right? So it's great that you're taking these sequences and that you're doing them. That makes you good. That makes you better than average. You're going to get a lot more mileage out of your training. You're going to have a lot more success on course than most people. But to get to that super elite level, you need to add on those additional challenges.
All right. So we hope you can take these tips, and the next time you have an NQ run, you're not going to be so upset, because now you have fuel for your training for the week. You know what you're going to go home and set up and work through, and you're going to be that much better prepared for your next trial. And this idea is so important that it is what we do when we prepare for big events like AKC Nationals. And right now we have an online course going on that uses the invitational as the inspiration for the challenges. And what we do is take small space sequences, something that the majority of people have enough room to set up in their training fields and work through different handling options. And these sequences come from real courses with the whatever spacing and angles that we're seeing in actual competitions. And that is open right now for registration. baddogagility.com/prep will get you to the sign up page. And we already have the first round of exercises out there, so you can get started right away. And we hope to see you online. That's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, onetdc.com and hititboard.com. Happy training.